I was halfway across downtown Chicago when my husband's phone began to vibrate in my hand. I had taken it by mistake during the morning rush. Ethan and I owned identical black phones in identical leather cases. A matching set he had bought 3 weeks earlier because he liked everything in our marriage to look coordinated from the outside. 10 minutes after I left our house, I was standing inside a crowded commuter train with one hand wrapped around a metal pole and the other holding the device I thought was mine. The screen lit up with a single letter, S. I almost ignored it. Then the call came again. And again. On the fourth attempt, I answered because I assumed it was one of Ethan's clients, and I intended to explain the mix-up before the train entered the tunnel. I never got the chance. The moment the line connected, a woman whispered, "Do not say my name. Is she still close enough to hear you?" I froze. Around me, hundreds of commuters stared at their own screens, drank coffee, and complained silently about the delays. No one knew that my entire marriage had just changed in the space between 2 train stations. I did not answer. The woman took my silence for caution. "Did she sign the divorce papers yet?" she asked. "I am tired of waiting." "Ethan, you promised the money would be protected before Friday. The Cayman account is funded. The apartment closes tomorrow. And the lawyer says all you need is her signature on the asset restructuring forms. Once she signs, you can serve her and freeze the domestic accounts before she even knows what happened." My fingers went cold around the phone. She kept talking. She told my husband that she had already packed Imperius Lawn Aftazir. She complained that the penthouse furniture had arrived in the wrong shade of cream. She asked whether he had transferred the last $800,000 from something she called the Whitmore Family Reserve. Then she laughed and said, "She reviews risk for teachers all day. But she never noticed what you were doing right under her nose." The train plunged into a tunnel, and the windows became black mirrors. I saw my own reflection staring back at me. Kalmfatze. Gray coat. Hair pinned neatly at the base of my neck. 38 years old. Married for 12 years. A senior banking risk officer who had spent her entire career identifying fraud patterns before they became disasters. My husband and his mistress believed I was the one person who would never recognize the pattern inside my own home. Before I could decide what to do, the woman lowered her voice again. "One more thing. Make sure she signs every page tonight. The forged emails will not matter if we have her actual signature on the release. After that, the trust money is ours." She paused. "Ethan, are you there?" I looked down at my left wrist and tapped the record icon on my watch. It had already captured most of the call through the phone's speaker. I remained silent. She exhaled impatiently. "Fine. Call me when the papers are signed. And do not bring that phone home unlocked. If Nora ever sees the hidden folder, we are both finished." Then she disconnected. The train shot out of the tunnel into white morning light. For 3 seconds I could not hear anything except the blood moving through my ears. Then the instincts I had trained for 17 years took over. I did not call my husband. I did not call the woman back. I did not cry, scream, or demand an explanation. I opened the phone's settings. Disabled automatic cloud deletion. Turned off remote wipe. And placed the device inside the signal-blocking sleeve I carried in my work bag for sensitive investigations. My husband believed the phone in my hand contained the plan that would destroy me. He did not realize it contained every piece of evidence I needed to destroy his plan. My name is Nora Whitmore. And this is the story of how one accidental phone call exposed an affair, a secret divorce, 3 shell companies, a forged signature, and a financial theft so large that my husband eventually had to explain it under oath with federal investigators sitting 6 feet away. Before I tell you how I let him believe he had won until the final signature was on the table, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe silence is not weakness when you are using it to gather evidence. To understand why Ethan thought he could steal my future and hand it to another woman, we have to go back 6 months. To a Sunday evening when he first asked me whether I trusted him with everything. At the time, I thought it was a romantic question. We were sitting in the kitchen of our renovated brownstone, eating takeout noodles from white cartons because neither of us had wanted to cook. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Ethan sat across from me in a navy cashmere sweater, one ankle resting across his knee, looking like the polished financial advisor his clients believed could solve any problem. At 41, he had perfected the appearance of measured confidence. He spoke slowly in meetings. He remembered the names of people's children. He wore watches that looked expensive without appearing vulgar. His professional biography described him as a wealth strategist for high-net-worth families. What it did not mention was that when we met, Ethan had $27,000 in credit card debt, a failed brokerage exam, and a habit of confusing charm with competence. I met him when I was 26 and working late nights in the operational risk department of a regional bank. He was a junior client associate who had been transferred twice in 1 year because managers liked him until they had to depend on him. I liked him immediately. He was funny, attentive, and unashamed of how much he admired my discipline. He used to bring dinner to my desk when quarterly audits ran past midnight. He told me my mind was the most beautiful thing about me. When we married 3 years later, I believed we were building a life together. I helped him study for his licenses. I introduced him to a mentor in private banking. I paid the mortgage during the year. He left one firm and joined another when he struggled to attract wealthy clients. I helped him create a risk-based planning model that became the foundation of his presentations. Ethan eventually became successful, but somewhere along the way he rewrote the story. In his version, he had always been the visionary. I was the cautious wife with a respectable but boring job. At dinner parties, he joked that I spent my days looking for reasons to say no, while he taught people how to grow. His friends laughed. I laughed too because the first few times it sounded harmless. Then the jokes sharpened. Nora thinks a vacation is a spreadsheet with a beach tab. Nora would ensure the champagne before opening it. Nora is brilliant, but she has never understood that wealth belongs to people willing to take risks. He said those things with a smile. And if I objected, he kissed my forehead and told me not to be sensitive. That rainy Sunday, Ethan reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "Do you trust me with everything?" he asked. "Of course," I said. He smiled. "Then I want us to simplify." He explained that our financial structure had become too complicated. We had retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, our home, a vacation property, several inherited investments, and a family reserve established by my late mother. He said we were wasting money on separate advisors and duplicated legal entities. He wanted to consolidate everything under a new wealth management platform his firm had developed. "It will make our lives easier," he said. "One dashboard, one strategy, one person accountable." "You?" I asked. He laughed. "Your husband. The man you trust." I told him I would review the proposal. His smile tightened for only a fraction of a second. "There is nothing to review, Nora. It is standard restructuring. Then reviewing it will be easy." He withdrew his hand and leaned back. "This is exactly what I mean. You can never just let me handle something." The argument lasted 20 minutes. Ethan accused me of treating him like an employee. I reminded him that fiduciary structures mattered. He said I was embarrassing him by acting as though his professional judgment was inferior to mine. Eventually, he stood, threw the empty cartons into the sink, and left the room. That was the first time I saw the anger beneath his polish. The next morning, he apologized with flowers. For the next 3 weeks, he became almost aggressively affectionate. He made breakfast. He sent messages during the day. He booked a weekend at a lake resort where we had celebrated our 5th anniversary. I wanted to believe the tension had passed. Instead, that trip gave me the first concrete sign that something was wrong. On Saturday afternoon, Ethan told me he needed to take a call from a nervous client. He stepped onto the balcony with his phone and closed the glass door behind him. I was reading near the fireplace when I heard him laugh. It was not the polite laugh he used with clients. It was intimate and soft. He turned slightly, saw me looking, and moved farther along the balcony. When he returned, I asked which client had needed him. The Hollands, he said without hesitation. I knew the Hollands. They were in Singapore for 6 weeks and had told us they wanted no calls unless the market fell more than 10%. The market had risen that day. I said nothing. On Monday, I checked our shared travel statement. Ethan had charged 2 spa treatments to the room while I had been attending a virtual meeting. One treatment was mine. The other was listed under the initials S.C. When I asked him about it, he stared at the statement and laughed. The hotel must have coded something incorrectly. What does S.C. stand for? How would I know you signed the receipt? He looked at me for a long moment. Then his expression changed into concern. Nora, are you sleeping? What, you have been tense for months. Now you are interrogating me over a spa code. I asked one question. You are building a case out of nothing. He reached for my hand. I pulled it away. He sighed as though I had confirmed a private fear. Maybe you should talk to someone. This level of suspicion is not healthy. That sentence stayed with me. Not because I believed him, but because of how prepared it sounded. He had not reacted like a man surprised by a mistaken charge. He had reacted like a man rehearsing a diagnosis. Over the next 2 months, small inconsistencies multiplied. Ethan changed the password to our home office. He began taking calls in his car. He purchased a second laptop and said it belonged to a client project. He started going to a private gym across town, even though our building had a full fitness center. He told me I was imagining the smell of unfamiliar perfume on his coats. He claimed new shirts were gifts from clients. He missed my mother's memorial dinner because of an emergency portfolio review that did not appear on his calendar. Every time I asked a question, he responded with patient disappointment. I was stressed. I was paranoid. I was bringing my work home. I was confusing professional vigilance with marital trust. The language was consistent enough to become a pattern. At work, patterns were where investigations began. At home, love made me hesitate. I did not want to become a woman who searched her husband's pockets or tracked his location. I wanted him to tell me the truth voluntarily. He never did. Instead, he began preparing me for what he later planned to call an emotional breakdown. In conversations with friends, he mentioned that I was under unusual pressure. He told his sister, Mariana, that I had become forgetful. He suggested I take leave from work. At a dinner with colleagues, he interrupted me twice and said, "That is not what happened." Nora. Over details I knew precisely. The second time, he squeezed my knee beneath the table and whispered, "Do not make this worse." I went home that night and opened a blank document. At the top, I typed 3 words, Personal Risk Review. I listed every anomaly I could remember. Dates. Charges. Statements. Password changes. Contradiction. I did not accuse him of anything. I simply recorded facts. That document eventually became 47 pages long. The first clear financial irregularity appeared in March. Our joint investment account showed a transfer of $125,000 to Whitmore Strategic Holdings. I had never heard of the company. Ethan told me it was an internal settlement vehicle. Why does an internal vehicle use our home address? I asked. He took the statement from my hand. Because I registered it before the office mailbox was available. Who owns it? We do. I do not remember signing formation documents. You signed a stack of documents after Christmas. What documents? He rubbed his forehead. This is exhausting. I handle wealth structures for a living. And I handle control failures. This is not a control failure. Then show me the operating agreement. He became very still. You do not trust me. Show me the agreement. He walked out. 2 days later, he sent me a 4-page PDF describing Whitmore Strategic Holdings as a marital investment entity. My name appeared under member consent. The signature looked like mine. It was not mine. Most people think forged signatures are obvious. They expect shaky letters or a misspelled name. Ethan had access to hundreds of examples of my signature from tax returns, property documents, and holiday cards. The forgery was excellent, but the capital N was wrong. I always began the first stroke below the baseline because of an old injury in my right wrist. The signature on the PDF began above it. I zoomed in. The digital compression around the signature did not match the surrounding page. It had been inserted. I felt a cold pressure form behind my ribs. Still, I did not confront him. A forged signature was not a marital misunderstanding. It was evidence. The next morning, I called an attorney from a phone in my office conference room. Evelyn Shaw had handled my mother's estate and helped establish the Whitmore Family Reserve. She was 62, precise, and incapable of being intimidated by expensive suits. I told her I needed a confidential review of several documents. She asked whether I was safe. Physically, yes. Financially, I do not know yet. Emotionally, I looked through the glass wall of the conference room at my staff, moving between desks. Ask me after we know what he did. Evelyn arranged to meet me that evening in a private room at her firm. I brought the PDF, account statements, and my personal risk review. She read without interruption. When she reached the forged signature, she removed her glasses. Nora, this is not just a bad husband. I know. If this document was used to move trust assets, it may be bank fraud. I know. Does Ethan have access to the Reserve Limited Administrative Authority for Household Investments? No authority to change ownership or beneficiaries. Does he know that he signed the original acknowledgement? Evelyn looked at me carefully. Then we do not warn him. That was the moment my marriage stopped being a private emotional crisis and became an active investigation. We hired a forensic accountant named Priya Desai, who had spent 15 years tracing hidden assets through divorces, bankruptcies, and corporate theft. Priya did not ask whether I thought Ethan was having an affair. She asked for tax returns, brokerage statements, insurance records, device lists, and every version of the restructuring proposal. Within 5 days, she found 3 companies: Whitmore Strategic Holdings, Lakefront Advisory Services, Meridian Residential Partners. All had been formed within the previous 18 months. Whitmore Strategic Holdings received transfers from our joint account. Lakefront Advisory Services paid rent on an apartment in a new luxury tower. Meridian Residential Partners had placed a deposit on a 3-bedroom penthouse scheduled to close in June. The registered manager of all 3 companies was Sabrina Cole. I recognized the initials from the spa receipt. S.C. Priya searched public filings and employment records. Sabrina was 30 years old and worked as a senior client operations coordinator at Ethan's firm. She managed account openings, document routing, and secure client communications. She also had access to templates, signature packets, and transaction instructions. Your husband did not choose a random mistress, Priya said. He chose someone positioned inside the system. The sentence hurt more than I expected. An affair could be impulsive. This was architecture. They had built something together. Evelyn asked whether I wanted to file immediately. I looked at the timeline on the wall. Transfers. Companies. Apartment. Forged consent. Gaslighting. Not yet. Why? Because they are still moving. That increases the risk. It also creates evidence. Priya nodded slowly. She is right. If we freeze too early, they will claim clerical error and marital authorization. Evelyn crossed her arms. And if we wait too long, they may move funds beyond recovery. Then we monitor, mark, and control the exit points. I said, for the first time that evening. Evelyn smiled without humor. You really do work in risk. We built a silent containment plan. The family reserve was not an ordinary account. My mother created it after my father died. Using proceeds from a manufacturing company she had sold, the trust held several $1 million in conservative investments and owned a minority interest in 2 commercial properties. Ethan had no beneficial ownership. He had authority to recommend allocations and approve routine household distributions below $50,000. Any transfer above that threshold required either my signature or direct confirmation from the independent trustee. Somehow, multiple transfers had occurred using documents that appeared to contain my approval. That meant one of 3 things. The bank had ignored its controls. The trustee had been deceived. Or someone inside the process was cooperating. We did not yet know which answer was worse. Priya traced the first $125,000 to a domestic brokerage account, then to Lakefront Advisory Services, then into a certified deposit for the luxury apartment. A second transfer of $300,000 went through the same path. A third transfer attempt for $800,000 had been initiated but not completed. That was the amount Sabrina mentioned on the phone months later. At that time, we still had no proof of the affair beyond circumstantial records. Then Ethan made a mistake. He booked a weekend in New York using reward points attached to our shared travel account. He told me he was attending an industry conference. The conference did exist, but Ethan was not registered. Sabrina was dating Linus. A photograph appeared on the hotel's social media page showing guests at a rooftop reception. Ethan stood near the railing with his hand at the small of Sabrina's back. She wore the emerald earrings my mother had left me. I had not seen them in months. When I asked Ethan whether he knew where they were, he did not hesitate. You put them in the safe after Christmas. I checked the safe while he was at work. The earrings were gone. So was a folder containing copies of my trust documents. That night, I sat in the dark living room and waited for him. He arrived after 11, loosened his tie, and looked irritated to find me awake. Long day, I asked. Awful. Did Sabrina help? His expression did not change. Who's Sabrina Cole? She works in operations. Was she at the New York conference? Probably. Half the firm was there. Were you photographed together? He gave a small laugh. Nora. Are we really doing this? Answer the question. I talked to dozens of colleagues. Did you give her my mother's earrings? His face hardened. You need to stop. That is not an answer. You have become obsessive. He dropped his keys on the table. I am not going to participate in another interrogation. Then tell me where the earrings are. In the safe? They are not. You moved them. I did not. He stepped closer. His voice became quiet. You have been forgetting things. I told Marianne I was worried about you. The manipulation was so clean that I almost admired it professionally. He had prepared witnesses. He had built a narrative. He was waiting for me to react. Instead, I smiled. You are right. I said. I have been under pressure. The anger left his eyes. Relief replaced it. Exactly. Maybe I should trust you more. That is all I have been asking. He wrapped his arms around me. I rested my cheek against his chest and listened to his heart. It was steady. Mine was too. From that night forward, I stopped resisting. I became the wife Ethan needed me to be. I apologized for questioning him. I agreed to simplify our finances. I complimented his expertise. I told friends I was exhausted and grateful he handled the complicated things at home. I let him believe the gaslighting had worked. Behind the performance, Priya and Evelyn followed every movement. We installed transaction alerts with the trustee. We preserved log files. We obtained historical document metadata. We learned that Sabrina's employee credentials had accessed my account profile 17 times outside normal business hours. We discovered that forged emails had been sent from an address differing from mine by one letter. We identified a remote server that stored draft separation agreements, falsified medical notes, and a timeline titled Transition Plan. The plan described me as emotionally unstable, professionally burned out, and increasingly dependent on Ethan. It proposed that he persuade me to sign a broad asset management authorization under the pretense of reducing stress. Once signed, funds would move to the shell companies. Then he would file for divorce. Request temporary control of marital accounts, and argue that I was incapable of making sound decisions. The plan included talking points for Marianne and Ethan's mother, Patricia, who had agreed to describe several invented incidents in affidavits. It included a public relations strategy for Ethan's firm. It included a draft announcement introducing Sabrina as his new partner after a long and painful private separation. It even included suggested language for a sympathy post about supporting spouses through mental health crises. They were not planning to leave me. They were planning to erase me. Priya found the divorce papers in a password-protected folder linked to Sabrina's personal cloud account. The proposed settlement gave Ethan control of our home, our shared brokerage assets, and all interests in Whitmore Strategic Holdings. It described the family reserve as a marital investment portfolio subject to equitable division. That statement was false. The trust predated our marriage. Ethan knew it. The settlement also required me to waive claims against his firm and release all employees from liability. Sabrina's name did not appear anywhere. They want your signature before the filing, Evelyn said. Why? Because several of the transfers are vulnerable without ratification. If you sign a broad release, they will argue you approved prior transactions. So the divorce is secondary. The money is primary. I looked at the scanned pages on the screen. Then we let them bring me the papers. Evelyn studied me. You are proposing controlled delivery. I am proposing that we observe the complete act. That is not without risk. Neither is warning them. Priya leaned forward. If we can capture Ethan explaining the documents in his own words, and if he represents that the papers are something else, we establish intent. Where Evelyn asked, I thought about Ethan's habits. He loved formal settings. He loved conference rooms, glass walls, and people calling him Mr. Whitmore. He believed institutional furniture made lies sound legitimate. At the bank, I said, he will want the final signature witnessed. Priya nodded, and he will want the transfer processed immediately. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Then we make sure the institution is ready. For the next 2 months, we prepared. I went to work each morning, reviewed operational risk reports, approved remediation plans, and led meetings about control failures in institutions that had nothing to do with my private life. At night, I returned home and listened to Ethan explain our future. He wanted us to travel more. He wanted me to reduce my hours. He wanted us to consolidate accounts. He wanted me to sign documents without reading every line. He became affectionate whenever I agreed and cold whenever I hesitated. He used love as a reward system. Meanwhile, Sabrina became bolder. She sent messages while he sat beside me. He turned the phone face down and smiled. She ordered furniture for the penthouse. She selected schools near the building because she wanted children. She created a private wedding board. In one message, she wrote, Once Nora signs, We can finally live like the people we were supposed to be. Ethan replied. She has always been a temporary obstacle. I read those words at Evelyn's office while Priya watched me. Do you need a break? Priya asked. No. You are allowed to be hurt. I am hurt. You do not look hurt. That is because I am working. The truth was more complicated. Pain moved through me in waves. Sometimes it arrived as anger, sometimes as humiliation, sometimes as grief for the young man who had brought dinner to my desk and listened while I explained risk matrices he pretended to find fascinating. I kept searching for a moment when he had changed. There was no single moment. There were hundreds. Each lie was small enough to forgive until the structure became visible. By May, Ethan believed I was ready. He began leaving printed materials on the kitchen counter. Articles about simplifying estates, brochures from private banks, a magazine open to a story about couples building financial unity. One evening, he poured wine and told me he had scheduled a meeting with Sterling Private Bank. They can put everything into one coordinated structure. He said, no more multiple advisors, no more confusion. When Friday, at 2, I have a committee review. Move it. Ethan. This is our future. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I need you to show me that you trust me. I let the silence stretch. Then I nodded. All right. His entire body relaxed. You will not regret it. That sentence nearly made me laugh. Instead, I lifted my glass. What exactly am I signing? Administrative authorizations. Nothing dramatic. Can I see them before Friday? His smile remained. But his thumb stopped moving across my hand. The bank is finalizing the packet. Which advisor? A man named Charles Renner. We had already spoken to Charles. He was not an advisor. He was Sterling Private Bank's regional head of fraud prevention. He had reviewed the forged instructions and alerted the bank's legal department. The meeting Ethan believed would transfer my assets had been converted into a controlled interview. Charles would sit at the head of the table. Evelyn would be introduced as outside counsel for the institution. Priya would observe through the glass. 2 federal financial investigators would wait in an adjacent room because the transfers crossed state lines and involved electronic instructions. The independent trustee would join remotely. Every document would be recorded, scanned, and marked. Ethan knew none of this. He believed Charles was a senior wealth strategist impressed by his proposal. Sabrina had arranged the appointment using an internal referral. She believed her credentials gave them control over the room. On Thursday morning, the day before the meeting, I rushed out of the house and took Ethan's phone by mistake. That was when Sabrina called and gave me the one piece we had not yet confirmed. She said the divorce papers were hidden inside the restructuring packet. She said the forged emails would not matter once I provided a real signature. She said the money was already in the Cayman account. The Cayman reference changed everything. Until that moment, we had traced funds only through domestic entities. I reached my office and locked the door. I removed the phone from the signal-blocking sleeve and called Evelyn from a secure line. We have an offshore destination. I said. How do you know? Sabrina told me. You spoke to her. She thought I was Ethan. I played the recording. Evelyn did not interrupt. When it ended, she said, do not touch anything else on the phone. I have not. Do not take screenshots. I know. Do not forward messages. Evain. I am saying it because this device is now primary evidence. Applin. I know. She exhaled. Can you return it without alerting him? Yes. How I looked through the glass wall of my office. Across downtown, Ethan's firm occupied the 32nd floor of a tower connected to ours by an underground concourse. I am going to let him find me. I removed my own phone from my bag. It contained 6 missed calls from Ethan and 3 messages. You took my phone? Call me immediately. Nora. This is not funny. Do not unlock it, I replied from my phone. I just noticed. I am in meetings until 11. You can send an assistant to swap them. His response arrived instantly. I will come myself. Of course he would. The phone held his entire secret life. 11 minutes later, my assistant told me Ethan was in reception. I placed his phone on the center of my desk beside mine. I opened a routine risk report on my monitor and left my office door unlocked. Ethan entered without knocking. His face was composed, but the skin around his eyes was tight. You took my phone, and you took mine. Did you open it? I looked up. Why would I? It is company property. Then perhaps you should not keep it beside our coffee maker. He walked to the desk and picked it up. Was it locked? I did not check. Did anyone call? I let 1 second pass. A number marked S called several times. I declined it because it was not my phone. His grip tightened. You declined it, yes. You did not answer. No. The lie came easily because every truthful answer he had owed me had been replaced by one of his own. Ethan studied my face. I turned back to the report. Is something wrong? No. Then close the door when you leave. For a moment, he did not move. Then he slipped the phone into his jacket. Tomorrow at 2. He said, do not be late. I will be there. He left. Through the glass. I watched him walk across the office with the controlled speed of a man trying not to run. 10 minutes later, Sabrina's account accessed the hidden server. She deleted the transition plan, the divorce drafts, and 3 message archives. The forensic preservation system copied every deletion. By noon, she had called an offshore fiduciary service twice. B1. Ethan had attempted to accelerate the $800,000 transfer. The bank placed it into an administrative review queue. Exactly as planned. At 4, he came home carrying flowers and a bottle of champagne. He kissed me in the kitchen. Tomorrow is going to change everything, he said. I know, I replied. He smiled, believing I meant the same thing he did. The final week before the bank meeting revealed how many people Ethan had recruited into his version of reality. On Monday evening, Patricia invited us to dinner at her apartment overlooking Lincoln Park. She framed it as a family meal. But the table had been arranged like a hearing. Patricia sat at one end. Marianne and her husband, Colin, sat opposite me. Ethan chose the chair beside mine and kept one hand on the back of it, a physical reminder that we had arrived together. Patricia served roasted chicken on wedding china and watched me with the grave concern of someone preparing to deliver a diagnosis. Ethan says, you have been overwhelmed. She began. I cut a piece of chicken. Work is busy. More than busy. He says you are not sleeping. I sleep. He says you wake in the night and check accounts. Ethan gave a small embarrassed smile. Mom. I did not want this to become an intervention. Then why are we here? I asked. Marianne reached across the table. Because we love you. People often announce love before attempting to remove someone's authority. What do you need me to do? I asked. Patricia relaxed. Hearing surrender where there was only data collection. Let Ethan carry the financial burden for a while. Sign the restructuring documents. Take a leave from the bank. Let your mind rest. And if I do not, Colin looked down at his plate. Marianne said, no one is threatening you. I asked a question. Ethan's fingers pressed against the chair. Nora. This is exactly the defensive pattern we are worried about. I turned toward him. Which pattern you interpret support as an attack? What support? All of us are telling you the same thing. That does not make it true. Patricia Sahil. Your mother was also stubborn. The mention of my mother tightened something in my chest. You barely knew her. I knew she worried about your need for control. That was a lie. My mother trusted me with the reserve because she respected my judgment. Did she tell you that I asked? Patricia glanced at Ethan. It was obvious. So no. Marianne placed her fork down. Can we not turn this into cross-examination? You asked me here to discuss my capacity. No one said capacity. Ethan prepared documents describing impaired judgment. The color drained from Marianne's face before she recovered. Patricia's expression did not change quickly enough. That was confirmation. Ethan laughed. What documents, you tell me? This is paranoia. Then why did Marianne react? Marianne said. I did not react. You stopped breathing. Nora. Colin finally looked up. Maybe everyone should slow down. Patricia raised her glass. This is what Ethan lives with. Every word analyzed. Every expression turned into evidence. I looked at her. Only when people lie. Ethan stood. We are leaving. Why? Because you are humiliating my family. I thought this was an intervention for me. You are proving the need for it. He pushed his chair back. I remained seated. I have not finished dinner. His face tightened. Nora, sit down. Ethan. The words came out with the calm authority I used in executive meetings. For 1 second, he obeyed instinctively. Then he realized everyone had seen it. Anger flashed across his face. I softened my tone. Please. Sit. He did. But the damage to his pride was visible. I looked around the table. Let us make this simple. Has anyone here personally observed me become confused? Violent. Forgetful. Or incapable of managing my affairs? Patricia answered first. You left the stove on. When a few weeks ago. Which day I do not remember. Were you at our house? Ethan told me. Then you did not observe it. Marianne said. You forgot my birthday lunch. I declined because I was in Toronto. You told me after. The calendar invitation showed Toronto when you sent it. That is not the point. It is exactly the point. Declining an event is not forgetting it. Colin shifted uncomfortably. I have not observed anything. He said. Marianne looked at him sharply. Colin, she asked. I turned to Patricia. Anything else? Your tone is enough. My tone is not incapacity. Ethan put both palms on the table. Stop using legal language with my mother. Then, stop asking your mother to build a legal record. Silence. Patricia's eyes narrowed. What are you accusing us of? Nothing. I am asking questions. You have always thought you were better than this family. No. I thought I was part of it. The sadness in my own voice surprised me. Ethan heard it and changed strategy. He reached for my hand. You are part of it. That is why we are worried. I let him take my hand. Then show me the documents before Friday. The bank is finalizing them. Show me the draft. There is no final draft. The draft. Nora. If the purpose is to help me. Transparency should not be difficult. Patricia said. You either trust your husband, or you do not. I looked at Ethan. I trust documents more when I am allowed to read them. He released my hand. Dinner ended 10 minutes later. In the elevator. Ethan stood facing the doors with his jaw clenched. You embarrassed me. Your family invited me to surrender control of my assets. They were trying to help. Why did Patricia describe an incident she never witnessed? Because I told her about it. It never happened. You left a burner on. Which burner? The front one. Gas or electric? He turned toward me. What kind of question is that? Our stove is induction. There is no flame. It shuts off when no pan is detected. He stared at me. Maybe it was the oven. You said burner. I am not doing this. You are not good at specific lies. The elevator doors opened. He stepped out before me. On the drive home. He did not speak. I watched the city move past the passenger window and understood why the affidavits were so vague. Their strength depended on repetition, not detail. Ethan had told the same story to enough people that he expected consistency to substitute for truth. The next morning, Priya obtained metadata from the supposed therapist's letter. The document had been created on Sabrina's laptop using a template downloaded from a mental health clinic's website. The therapist named in the letter existed, but the license number belonged to a retired social worker in another state. The signature image had been copied from an online directory. They are creating medical evidence. Evelyn said. Poorly. Priya replied. Poorly is enough if no one checks. I thought about all the institutions that accept documents because they look familiar. Letterhead. Signature. Date. A concerned spouse. A worried mother. Fraud does not always defeat controls through sophistication. Sometimes it simply arrives wearing the uniform of legitimacy. We sent the false letter to the investigators and to the clinic whose identity had been used. The clinic's attorney responded within hours. By afternoon, a cease and desist notice had been issued to the email address connected to the document. Sabrina opened it at 4:12. At 4:19, she called Ethan. The preservation system captured only metadata, not the conversation. But Ethan returned home that evening, visibly agitated. Did you contact a clinic? He asked while removing his coat. I looked up from the dining table. Which clinic? Some medical office says you complained about a letter. Why would they contact you? They did not contact me. Then how do you know? He paused. A colleague mentioned it. Which colleague? This is what I mean. Every answer becomes 10 questions. Because the answers do not connect. You are impossible. He went into the home office and locked the door. An hour later, the hidden server recorded a new folder titled Legal Exposure. Ethan began drafting a narrative, claiming Sabrina independently created the medical letter after becoming overly involved in his personal life. He wrote that he had tried to end the affair and she threatened to destroy his marriage. The contingency plan was no longer hypothetical. He was preparing to sacrifice her before the bank meeting even occurred. I wondered whether Sabrina sensed it. Their messages that week became tense. She asked why he had not filed the divorce already. He told her timing was delicate. She asked whether the Cayman account was protected. He told her to stop using the account name in messages. She asked when she could tell her parents about the engagement. He did not answer. She sent a photograph of 3 wedding dresses. Ethan replied with a thumbs-up icon. At home. He asked whether I preferred Italy or Portugal for our anniversary trip. I told him Portugal. He opened a travel website and spent 40 minutes comparing hotels he had no intention of visiting with me. That was the part I found most difficult to understand. The fraud had a purpose. The false documents had a purpose. Even the gaslighting served a strategy. But the unnecessary tenderness, the imaginary travel, the hand at my back while we cooked dinner, those things were not required. Perhaps he needed to keep performing husband because the alternative would force him to see himself clearly. Or perhaps deception had become his most natural form of intimacy. On Wednesday, I attended a professional conference where Ethan was scheduled to moderate a panel on generational wealth. I considered skipping it. Evelyn advised me to maintain normal behavior. The ballroom held 300 advisors, bankers, attorneys, and family office executives. Ethan stood on stage beneath a screen displaying Stewardship Across Generations. He asked panelists how families could preserve trust and transparency during periods of transition. The hypocrisy was so precise it almost became art. During the reception, he introduced me to a prospective client. My wife keeps banks honest, he said proudly. She sees risk before anyone else. The client smiled. Then you must never get away with anything at home. Ethan laughed. I am an open book. I looked directly at him. Every book can be audited. His smile held. but his eyes hardened. Sabrina stood 15 feet away holding a tablet. She wore my mother's emerald earrings. This time I knew she had not borrowed them accidentally. Ethan must have given them to her as proof that the transfer of my life had already begun. She caught me looking and touched one earring with 2 fingers. Then she smiled. It was a small, private act of cruelty. I felt anger rise so sharply that the room narrowed. I could have crossed the floor. I could have pulled the earrings from her ears and told 300 financial professionals exactly who she was. Instead, I lifted my glass in acknowledgement. Her smile faltered. Predators expect fear or attack. Calm recognition unsettles them because it suggests knowledge they cannot measure. Later that evening, Sabrina messaged Ethan. She knows about the earrings. Ethan replied, "She suspects everything and proves nothing. Keep them on." The message gave us direct evidence that he knew the property was mine and had intentionally transferred it to Sabrina. The earrings were valued below the threshold for a major criminal count. But their emotional weight did not need a statute. They proved he used my mother's belongings as part of the humiliation campaign. Priya cataloged the message and said, "He is escalating because he thinks you are almost controlled. He wants me to react." Yes. Then we give him nothing. Until Friday. The day before the meeting. Charles walked us through conference room 7. We tested the audio, camera angles, document scanner, and emergency controls. Grant asked me to sit in each chair and decide where I felt safest. I chose the seat nearest the door, then changed my mind. I want Ethan beside me. Evelyn frowned. Why? Because he always uses touch to direct the conversation. Hand on mine, knee against mine. He will behave naturally if he can do that. And you are comfortable with it? No. That was not the question. I can tolerate it. Grant said. Tolerance is not the standard. We can place him across the table. I looked at the empty chair beside mine. If he sits across from me, he will know something is wrong. He may know anyway. Then let his first mistake be underestimating the room, not detecting it. Grant accepted the decision but assigned a security officer outside the door. She also asked whether Ethan owned weapons. One registered handgun in the house safe. I said, "Does he carry? Not legally in public? Has he threatened you?" No. Has he blocked exits during arguments? I remembered the kitchen. The way he sometimes stood between me and the hallway when he wanted an answer. Once or twice. Has he broken objects, a wine glass? He said it slipped. Any history of violence? No. Grant wrote without comment. The questions made me uncomfortable because they translated ordinary moments into risk factors. That was the same process I used professionally remove the story. Identify the behavior. Blocking an exit remained blocking an exit even when done by a husband in a cashmere sweater. Grant gave me a small transmitter and taught me the distress phrase. If I said, "I need to reconsider the timeline," security would enter. "Do not worry about sounding natural," she said. "Safety is more important than preserving the interview." I understand. Do you? Yes. You have spent months allowing him to believe he controls you. That can create pressure to keep performing, even when conditions change. She was right. Strategy can become another prison if you start protecting the plan more than yourself. I promised I would use the phrase if necessary. After the rehearsal, I met the independent trustee by video. His name was Samuel Price, and he had administered the reserve since my mother created it. He looked exhausted. "I owe you an apology," he said. "The bank confirmed through what appeared to be your contact channel. Did you speak to me? We received a voice verification. Sabrina, we believe a synthetic clip may have been used for one call. Another was answered by a woman who gave the correct challenge responses. The answers came from my trust documents. Yes. Why were larger transfers not escalated directly to you? They were presented as staged investments below reporting thresholds. Priya displayed the pattern: 49,000, 48,500, 49,700. Repeated amounts designed to remain below the $50,000 secondary review threshold, followed by consolidation in the shell company. Structuring. I said, "Exactly." Samuel removed his glasses. Ethan understood the control design. I explained it to him when we married. He used your explanation against you. The realization landed heavily. Years earlier, I had walked Ethan through the reserve because I believed transparency protected us. He remembered every threshold, every trustee process, every exception. Knowledge had not corrupted him. It had given corruption a map. "The trust will pursue recovery," Samuel said, "and we are changing the controls immediately." Not immediately. After Friday, he looked uncomfortable. "The attempted transfer remains a risk. It is blocked. Administratively." "Yes." "Then, let them complete the representation." Samuel glanced toward Evelyn. She said, "Nora understands the trade-off." He nodded reluctantly. "Your mother trusted me to protect this." "My mother trusted both of us." Ethan exploited that. "I should have called you personally." "Yes." He accepted the answer. Accountability sounded different from apology when it did not defend itself. Before the call ended, Samuel said, "Your mother once told me you would always notice the second lock on a door." I smiled despite myself. "She said that. She said most people check whether a door closes. You check whether it can be reopened by the wrong person." After the screen went dark, I sat alone in Evelyn's conference room. My mother had been dead 3 years. Grief had softened from a daily absence into an ache triggered by unexpected details. Ethan knew how fiercely I protected what she built. That was why he needed me declared unstable rather than simply uninformed. If I remained credible, the trust was unreachable. The plan was not only financial, it was an attack on the quality my mother respected most in me: judgment. I opened the transition plan again. Under public incident options, Ethan had listed possible triggers: challenge her memory in front of friends, raise concerns about medication, create argument over missing jewelry, encourage workplace leave, arrange family confrontation, present surprise documents and record reaction. The missing earrings had been deliberate. The dinner at Patricia's had been staged. The bank meeting was intended to be the final provocation. They planned to hide divorce pages inside financial documents, obtain my signature, then reveal enough to make me react while witnesses watched. If I shouted, they would call it instability. If I cried, they would call it emotional collapse. If I left, they would call it abandonment. If I stayed silent, they would treat it as consent. Every response had been assigned a meaning before I made it. That was the most dangerous part of gaslighting. It did not merely deny your reality. It pre-wrote the interpretation of anything you might do to defend it. I closed the document. "What are you thinking?" Evelyn asked from the doorway. That there was no correct response inside his plan. Correct. So I had to leave the plan. "You did?" "Not yet." "Nora. The plan is already broken. He does not know that." Evelyn came into the room and sat across from me. "Tomorrow is evidence collection, not revenge." "I know. Do you?" "Everyone keeps asking me that." "Because you are very controlled." "Would you prefer I fall apart?" "I would prefer you not confuse control with invulnerability." I looked down at my hands. I am afraid that if I let myself feel everything, I will not be able to walk into the room. Then feel one thing. Which one choose? I thought of the earrings on Sabrina. The pancake breakfast Ethan was planning. My mother's trust. The letter in my bag. Disappointment. Why that? Because anger makes me want to punish him. Grief makes me want him back. Disappointment lets me see him accurately. Evelyn nodded. Then carry that tomorrow. Leave the rest with us. That night, Ethan arrived home early with groceries. He cooked salmon, opened wine, and asked about my day. I told him the committee review had been difficult. He listened with careful attention. After tomorrow, you should take a month off, he said. We could go somewhere warm. Portugal, if you want. Would Sabrina come? The question escaped before I could stop it. Ethan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Why would Sabrina come? You mention her often. I mention dozens of colleagues. Not at dinner. He placed the fork down. Are we starting this again? I let my shoulders drop. No. I am tired. His irritation softened instantly. That is what I have been saying. He moved his chair closer. You do not have to carry everything. What would you carry for me? All of it. He touched my face. That is what marriage is. I looked into the eyes I had known for 12 years. And what would I have left? He smiled as though the answer were romantic. Me. Laughter. While he showered. I stood in our bedroom and looked at the life he expected to inherit. His suits lined one side of the closet. My clothes occupied the other. Our wedding photograph rested on the dresser. In it. Ethan looked at me as though I were the only person in the room. I no longer knew whether that expression had been love, ambition, or both. I removed the photograph from the frame and found a folded receipt behind it. The receipt was from a document storage company. Unit 3, 18. Paid annually by Lakefront Advisory Services. The date was 8 months earlier. I photographed the receipt using the secure evidence application and returned it to the frame exactly as I found it. The next morning, investigators obtained a warrant for the storage unit. Because executing it before the meeting could alert Ethan by pursuing, they waited until the interview began. Inside Unit 318. They later found boxes containing copied client files, blank signature pages, promotional materials for the failed hotel project, and a portable safe. The safe held cash, foreign currency, and handwritten notes mapping transfers through the Cayman service. It also held a sealed envelope labeled Nora Medical. Inside were draft guardianship forms and a list of medications I had never taken. Ethan had researched whether sedatives could affect memory. There was no evidence he had administered anything. But the search history alone made Evelyn insist I undergo medical testing. The results were normal. Knowing he had considered the question altered the emotional scale of the case. Financial abuse often expands because the abuser learns that every successful violation creates room for another. A forged signature becomes a false affidavit. A false affidavit becomes a guardianship plan. A guardianship plan becomes research into how to make the story appear true. I did not know how far Ethan would have gone. I only knew the phone call had interrupted him before he found out. Before bed, he placed the bank packet reminder on my nightstand. 2 o'clock. He said, bring identification. I know. And Nora, yes. Please do not embarrass me tomorrow. The request was delivered gently. That made it crueler. I would never do anything you had not earned. I said. He mistook the sentence for reassurance. Thank you. He turned off the lamp. In the darkness, his breathing settled into sleep. I remained awake beside him for another hour, listening to the ordinary sound of a man who believed morning would deliver him my life. Friday morning began with Ethan making pancakes. He had not made pancakes in 4 years. I came downstairs at 7 and found him standing over the stove in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled carefully to his elbows. Jazz played from the kitchen speakers. 2 plates waited on the island. The performance was so complete that for half a second I saw the man I once loved instead of the man who had forged my name. You are up early, I said. Big day. He turned and smiled. I thought we should start it properly. He placed a plate in front of me and poured coffee into my favorite blue mug. There was a small wrapped box beside it. "What is this? Open it." Inside was a gold bracelet with a narrow row of diamonds. It was tasteful, expensive, and entirely unlike the dramatic gifts Ethan usually preferred. I checked the clasp. The store tag had been removed, but the serial number remained. Priya had already identified a jewelry purchase through Lakefront Advisory Services 3 weeks earlier. 2 bracelets. 1 gold, 1 platinum. Sabrina's private photographs showed the platinum bracelet on her wrist. Ethan had bought matching gifts for his wife and mistress using money stolen from my trust. "It is beautiful," I said. "For a new beginning?" He fastened it around my wrist. His fingers were warm. "After today, we can stop fighting about money." "Were we fighting?" He laughed. "You know what I mean." "I suppose I do." He sat opposite me and watched until I took a bite. The pancakes tasted of vanilla and ash. "I invited my mother and Marianne to dinner tonight," he said. "Why?" "To celebrate. Celebrate what the restructuring. Us making a mature decision together. It is only paperwork. It is more than that." He reached for my hand. "It means we are finally on the same team." Patricia and Marianne had already signed affidavits describing my supposed instability. Their presence that evening was not a celebration. It was witness management. If I discovered the divorce provisions after signing, Ethan wanted 2 family members present to describe my reaction. He wanted crying, shouting, thrown glasses, anything that could be translated into dangerous behavior. "That sounds nice," I said. "You are not nervous, should I be?" His eyes searched mine. "No. Then I am not." He smiled. We ate in silence. Before leaving, he kissed my forehead and told me to wear something professional, but not intimidating. "The bank wants to see us as a couple," he said, "not as 2 lawyers negotiating." "I am not a lawyer." "You know what I mean." Again, I did. Ethan wanted the room to see a compliant wife. I chose a charcoal suit with a cream blouse and low black heels. Nothing theatrical. No armor visible from the outside. Beneath my blouse, I wore a small audio transmitter provided by the investigators. Though the conference room would also record through the bank system, in my bag, I carried my mother's original trust acknowledgement, the forged version, and a sealed letter I had written to Ethan 3 nights earlier. I did not know whether I would give it to him. The letter contained no accusations. It contained a list of moments from our marriage that had once been true. The first apartment with the broken radiator, the night he waited outside the hospital during my mother's surgery, the road trip where our car died in Nebraska and we laughed until sunrise. I wrote those memories because I needed to know that I had not imagined all 12 years. Love could have been real once and still become dangerous. At 11, Evelyn met me in a private dining room near the bank. Priya joined by video. Charles Renner arrived 10 minutes later with the bank's general counsel, Maria Alvarez. Charles was 50, broad-shouldered, and had the unhurried manner of a man who had spent decades watching liars fill silence with unnecessary details. "The transfer request remains pending," he said. "The offshore account exists. It is held through a Cayman Trust Services company. The beneficial ownership declaration lists Meridian Residential Partners." "Sabrina," I said, "nominally. But the account access logs show Ethan's devices." Maria opened a folder. "We also confirmed that the signature verification call was routed to a number controlled by Sabrina. Someone changed your contact number in the client profile for 18 minutes. Completed the verification. Then changed it back. Using her employee credentials." "Yes." "Why was that not detected?" Charles did not defend the institution. "It should have been. We are conducting a separate control review." The employee override required managerial approval. Who's a supervisor named Howard Bell? I knew the name. Howard had attended our wedding. He was one of Ethan's first mentors. Is he involved? He claims Ethan told him you were traveling and had authorized Sabrina to coordinate. Did he verify with me? No. Then he is involved whether he understands that or not. Maria nodded. That is our view. The federal investigators, Agents Leah Grant and Michael Torres, entered through a side door. Grant was compact, direct, and spoke in short sentences. Torres carried a thick evidence binder and rarely looked away from whoever was talking. Grant reviewed the plan. Ethan and Sabrina would arrive at 2. Charles would present the packet they believed contained the asset authorizations and divorce ratification. The pages had been replaced with controlled copies preserving the original language, but adding clear acknowledgement statements beside each disputed transfer. Ethan would be asked to explain every provision. Sabrina would be asked to confirm the source of instructions. I would sign nothing. If they attempted to pressure me, the meeting would continue until intent was sufficiently documented or safety required intervention. Are you comfortable sitting in the room? Grant asked. Yes. You can leave at any time. I will not. People behave unpredictably when they realize control is gone. Ethan is not physically violent. Grant's expression did not change. That is not what I asked. I considered the difference. I understand. Evelyn touched my wrist. The goal is evidence. Note en durance. I know. At 1:30. I went upstairs alone. Sterling Private Bank occupied 3 floors of a limestone tower overlooking the river. The private client lobby was designed to make wealth feel quiet. Pale wood. Low lighting. Art without price labels. A receptionist greeted me by name and led me to conference room 7. The room had a long walnut table, 12 leather chairs, and windows overlooking the city. A carafe of water sat beside 6 glasses. On the far wall, a screen displayed Sterling Private Bank, and beneath it, Family Asset Coordination Meeting. Charles sat at the head of the table. Maria occupied the chair to his right. Evelyn sat farther down, introduced on the printed place card as External Trust Counsel. The investigators waited behind a glass partition that could become transparent at the touch of a control. Priya monitored remotely. I chose the seat nearest the door. At 1:53, Sabrina arrived. She wore a cream suit, pearl earrings, and the platinum bracelet matching mine. Her hair was pulled into a smooth knot. She looked exactly like the professional image Ethan wanted beside him. For 1 second, surprise crossed her face when she saw me already seated. Then she smiled. Mrs. Whitmore. I am Sabrina Cole. We have exchanged emails. Have we? I asked. The question startled her. About the account transition. Of course. She placed a leather portfolio on the table and sat across from me. The platinum bracelet caught the light. Her eyes moved to my gold one. She understood immediately. A tiny flush rose along her neck. Beautiful bracelet. I said, Thank you. Was it a gift? A personal purchase? How fortunate. Charles offered coffee. Sabrina declined. She checked her phone twice. At 1:58, she typed a message. Through the monitoring system, Priya saw it appear on the preserved account. She wrote to Ethan, She is here. Calm. Counsel present, but looks routine. Do not mention divorce until signature pages. His response arrived seconds later. Perfect. 2 o'clock passed. At 2:04, Ethan entered, carrying a black briefcase. He paused when he saw Evelyn. I was not told outside counsel would attend. Charles stood and shook his hand. Ms. Shaw advises the trust relationship. Ethan looked at me. Did you invite her? The bank did. Evelyn offered a neutral smile. Good afternoon. Ethan. He sat beside me, close enough that his knee touched mine. Sabrina lowered her eyes. To anyone entering the room? We looked like a husband, wife, advisor, and support. Professional attending a routine financial meeting. Ethan placed his briefcase on the floor and rested one hand on the table. We appreciate everyone making time, he said. Nora and I have been discussing simplification for months. Today should be straightforward. That is our goal. Charles said, before signatures, we need to establish a clear record of the requested structure and the authority behind prior transactions. Ethan's smile did not move. Prior transactions, transfers to Whitmore Strategic Holdings, Lakefront Advisory Services, and Meridian Residential Partners. Sabrina looked at Ethan. He answered without turning toward her. All part of the coordinated strategy. Approved by both spouses, yes. In writing, yes. Explained fully to Mrs. Whitmore. Ethan placed his hand over mine. My wife understands the plan. I looked at his fingers covering mine. Do I? His hand tightened. We have discussed it extensively. Charles opened the first folder. Then let us walk through it. The opening pages described consolidation of marital assets. Ethan relaxed. He had seen this language. He began explaining tax efficiency, centralized reporting, and flexible investment authority. He spoke with the smooth confidence that had won clients for years. Charles asked him to define broad discretionary control. Ethan said it allowed the manager to respond quickly without unnecessary delays. Who is the manager? Charles asked. Initially me. Through Whitmore Strategic Holdings. Who owns that entity? Nora and I jointly. Evelyn slid the operating agreement across the table. Can you identify Mrs. Whitmore's original signature? Ethan glanced down. That one. Did you witness her sign? Yes. Where? At home. On what date? December 18th. What time? His eyes lifted. I do not remember the time. Was anyone else present? No. Did she receive a copy? Of course. Evelyn turned to me. Mrs. Whitmore, did you sign this document? Ethan laughed once. Nora. I did not sign it. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as though soothing a confused child. You signed a large packet before Christmas. You were tired. What was I wearing? What you said you witnessed me sign it. What was I wearing? How would I remember? Where in the house were we? The kitchen. Which pen did I use? This is absurd. You remember the date? But not the circumstances. Because the date is on the document. Exactly. Charles remained still. Sabrina folded her hands together. Ethan looked around the room and recalibrated. My wife has been under significant stress. He said, she has had difficulty remembering routine matters. Evelyn's voice was calm. Are you suggesting she lacks capacity? No. I am saying memory can be imperfect. Did you obtain a capacity assessment before asking her to transfer control of several $1 million? That was not necessary. But you are invoking impaired memory now that she disputes the signature. Ethan's jaw tightened. I am not here to be cross-examined. You are here to establish authority. Charles said, the distinction depends on your answers. Ethan withdrew his hand from mine. Fine. Bring in a handwriting expert. This does not need to delay the transfer. Maria opened a second folder. We did. She placed a report on the table. The signature was digitally inserted from a scanned tax document dated 3 years earlier. Sabrina's face lost color. Ethan did not look at the report. That is impossible. The source file remains on a server associated with Lakefront Advisory Services. Maria said, the upload occurred from an IP address assigned to your office. Then someone in operations made an error. The file name was Nora, signature clean final. PNG. Silence settled over the room. Ethan turned to Sabrina. It was the first time he looked at her directly. "Do you know anything about that?" She blinked. "You sent it to me." "I did not. You told me to place it on the consent page." "Sabrina," he said softly. "Be careful." The warning in his voice changed the air. Charles closed the folder. "We will return to the signature. First, I want to discuss the underlying transactions." He displayed a flowchart on the screen. Money moved from the Whitmore Family Reserve into Whitmore Strategic Holdings, then through Lakefront Advisory Services, then into Meridian Residential Partners, then toward the Cayman account. Ethan leaned back. "That chart is misleading. Which part it suggests concealment? Was the Cayman account disclosed to Mrs. Meshin-7? Whitmore. It is not a personal account. Who controls Meridian Residential Partners? An investment partner. Named Sabrina Cole." Ethan's face remained composed, but the pulse in his neck accelerated. "Ms. Cole serves as administrative manager. Does she contribute capital? Her compensation includes an interest." Sabrina stared at him. That answer was new to her. "What interest?" Charles asked. "A minority performance interest. Documented where?" "The operating agreement." "We have the operating agreement. It lists Ms. Cole as sole member." Ethan looked at Sabrina again. "That was temporary." She shook her head slightly. "You said it was mine." "Not now. You said the company was mine." "Sabrina." I watched their secret relationship become visible through the fractures in their coordination. Charles turned to me. "Mrs. Whitmore, had you heard of Meridian Residential Partners before this review?" "No." "Did you authorize money from your family trust to fund it?" "No." "Did you authorize the purchase of a penthouse at 410 East Harbor?" "No." Sabrina's eyes snapped toward me. I continued. "Did you authorize the purchase of 2 bracelets through Lakefront Advisory Services?" Charles asked. "No." Ethan's expression changed. "This is becoming ridiculous." I held up my wrist. "Mine is gold. Hers is platinum. Same designer. Consecutive serial numbers." Sabrina covered the bracelet with her opposite hand. Ethan stood. "We are leaving." No one stopped him. "That was part of the plan." Charles said, "You may leave. The transfer will remain frozen." Ethan did not move. "On what authority?" "Fraud review. You cannot freeze a client's funds because of a marital disagreement. The funds are not yours. They are marital assets. Evelyn opened my mother's trust acknowledgement. You signed this 9 years ago. Paragraph 12 confirms that the Whitmore Family Reserve is Nora's separate inherited property and that you hold no beneficial interest." Ethan looked at the page. His signature sat at the bottom. This one was real. Circumstances changed. Inheritance law did not avertation. Evelyn said, "We invested trust distributions into the marriage." "Some distributions." "Yes. Not the corpus. Not the commercial interests. Not the reserve account you attempted to redirect." Ethan remained standing. One hand braced on the table. "Nora. Tell them to stop." I looked up at him. "Why?" "Because this is our private business." Was it private when Sabrina discussed my divorce papers on the phone yesterday? The room became completely still. Sabrina turned toward Ethan. He stared at me. For the first time since entering, he forgot to perform. His face emptied. "What did you say?" I removed his phone from my bag. It was not the physical device he had taken from my office. It was an evidence clone provided by the investigators, identical in appearance and loaded with a verified image of the original data. I placed it on the table. "I took your phone by mistake." Sabrina's chair moved backward an inch. "You answered." I looked at her. "You never gave me a chance to speak." Ethan sat down slowly. "Nora. Whatever you think you heard." Charles touched the screen control. The conference speakers activated. Sabrina's recorded voice filled the room. "Do not say my name. Is she still close enough to hear you? No one moved? The recording continued. Did she sign the divorce papers yet? I am tired of waiting. Ethan, you promised the money would be protected before Friday. The Cayman account is funded. The apartment closes tomorrow. And the lawyer says all you need is her signature on the asset restructuring forms. Sabrina closed her eyes. Ethan looked at the door. Grant and Torres remained behind opaque glass. The recording played every word. The $800,000. The forged emails. The real signature required to ratify the theft. The instruction to keep the phone locked. When it ended, the silence was so complete that I could hear the ventilation system above us. Ethan recovered first. That recording is illegal. Grant's voice came through the room, speaker from behind the glass. Illinois permits recording when one party to the conversation consents under applicable circumstances. And Mrs. Whitmore was the receiving party. Your counsel can litigate admissibility later. Ethan stood again. Who is that? The glass wall changed from opaque to clear. Agents Grant and Torres sat at a small table on the other side. Torres had the evidence binder open. Grant watched Ethan with her hands folded. Sabrina made a sound that was almost a gasp. Federal agents, Ethan whispered. Charles spoke. Because the transfers crossed state lines, used electronic communications, and involved an offshore destination. Ethan looked at me. You brought federal agents into our marriage. You brought an offshore account into it. This is insane. No? I said. This is documented. He pointed towards Sabrina. She handled the accounts. I trusted her to process routine instructions. Sabrina stared at him. What if she exceeded her authority? That is an employment issue. You told me what to do. I told you to prepare options. You gave me Nora's signature file. I never gave you any signature file. You sent it from your private email. Then prove it. Charles touched another control. The screen displayed an email from Ethan's private account to Sabrina. Attached Nora, signature, clean, final. PNG. Message. Use this on the December consent. Keep metadata stripped. Sabrina read it aloud without meaning to. Keep metadata stripped. Ethan's mouth tightened. Accounts can be compromised. Torres turned a page behind the glass. The sending device was your home laptop. The authentication included your fingerprint. I want an attorney. Grant replied. You are not under arrest at this moment. You are free to leave. The bank is also free to preserve evidence and suspend the transfer. Ethan looked toward the conference room door again. He wanted to leave. But leaving meant abandoning the money. Control was still fighting survival. What exactly do you want? He asked. Charles answered. A truthful explanation of the transactions and the documents you brought for Mrs. Comminated. Whitmore's signature. Ethan's eyes moved to his briefcase. Maria noticed. Would you place the packet on the table? No. You scheduled this meeting to execute it. The meeting is over. He reached for the briefcase. Sabrina moved first. She bent, grabbed the handle, and pulled it toward her side. Ethan seized the other end. Let go. You said the divorce papers were in here. She said. You told me she would sign today. Be quiet. You told me the trust was marital property. Sabrina. You said no one was going to get hurt. His face twisted. You knew exactly what we were doing. I knew about the divorce. I did not know you forged her signature. You placed it. Because you said she approved it, and the scan was for convenience. Ethan laughed sharply. That is your defense. It is the truth. You opened the companies. For you. In your name. Because you said Nora would see yours. Every sentence pulled another beam from the structure they had built together. Grant opened the glass door and entered the conference room. Torres followed. They did not touch either of them. Grant stood near the end of the table. Mr. Whitmore. Ms. Cole. Neither of you is required to continue speaking. You have both asked questions about your legal exposure. The safest response is to obtain counsel. Ethan released the briefcase. Sabrina pulled it onto her lap and opened it. Inside were 3 sets of documents separated by blue tabs. Asset coordination. Marital release. Dissolution filing. She lifted the 3rd packet. You told me this would be served after she signed. Ethan said nothing. Sabrina opened it. The first page named Ethan as petitioner and me as respondent. The filing alleged irreconcilable differences, emotional volatility, financial recklessness, and an escalating pattern of irrational conduct. Attached was a proposed emergency motion granting Ethan temporary control of marital assets. Marianne's affidavit described me screaming at a family dinner that never happened. Patricia's affidavit claimed I had forgotten a stove burner and nearly caused a fire. A letter on a therapist's stationery stated that I showed signs of severe anxiety and impaired judgment. I had never met the therapist. Sabrina turned the pages faster. This says she threatened you. Draft language. Ethan said, You told me she did. You believed what you wanted to believe. Sabrina looked as though he had struck her. You said she was unstable. You needed a story that let you sleep at night. For the first time, I saw Sabrina not as a glamorous intruder, but as a woman discovering that the liar she helped had also lied to her. The recognition did not absolve her. She had known he was married. She had helped hide money. She had laughed about my ignorance. But betrayal has a particular expression. And I recognized it on her face. What else did you lie about? She asked. Ethan turned away. Sabrina pulled out her phone. The apartment. Not now. Is it ours? It is held by Meridian. Which I own. On paper. You said that protected me. It protected the transaction. From whom? He looked at me. Sabrina followed his gaze. From Nora. She whispered. I spoke quietly. The apartment was funded with trust assets you had no right to receive. Sabrina's hands began to shake. Will I lose it? Evelyn answered. The closing has not occurred. The deposit is frozen. You never owned the property. Ethan said the closing was tomorrow. It was scheduled for tomorrow. Charles said, The title company received a fraud hold this morning. Sabrina looked at Ethan. You knew I knew there might be a delay. You told me to resign next week. Sabrina. Stop talking. You told me we were flying to Grand Cayman on Monday. Stop. You bought tickets. Stop talking. His shout struck the glass walls. Outside the conference room, 2 bank employees looked toward us. Grant did not flinch. Mr. Whitmore. Lower your voice. Ethan turned on me. You did this. I remained seated. I answered a phone. You set a trap. You forged my name. You never trusted me. I trusted you for 12 years. No. You monitored me. You questioned me. You made me feel small in my own marriage. The reversal was almost elegant. I helped build your career. You never let me forget it. I did not mention it. You did not have to. Every time you reviewed a document, every time you corrected a number, every time someone asked your opinion before mine, you reminded me that you thought you were smarter. I did not think it. In this matter, I proved it. His face reddened. There. That is who you are. Cold. Superior. You care more about being right than saving us. There is no us inside a forged divorce petition. We could have fixed this privately. You plan to take my inheritance. Call me mentally unstable. And leave the country. I would have made sure you were comfortable. The words hung between us. Sabrina stared at him. Evelyn's eyes closed briefly. I asked, How much of my money did you believe was enough to keep me comfortable? That is not what I meant. You wrote a proposed settlement, giving me $6,000 a month for 2 years. You have a salary. So did you? I built relationships that generate long-term value. With my capital, our capital, my mother's trust, money you hoarded while I was expected to create a life for us. A life that included another woman, Sabrina, understood what it cost to be me. Sabrina's expression changed from fear to disbelief. Do not use me for this. Ethan turned. You said she suffocated me. You said that. I listened. You wanted this life. I wanted the life you described. Not prison. No one is going to prison. Torres finally spoke. That is not a promise you can make. Ethan stared at him. What are the alleged amounts? We are not conducting a charging discussion. Grant said. But the attempted transfer brings the documented total above $1.4 million, excluding company expense misuse and the proposed offshore movement. Sabrina covered her mouth. 1.4, Ethan said. Most of that money never left Nora's control. Attempt is still relevant. Torres replied. And several prior transfers completed. They were investments. In an apartment for your mistress, a residential asset, with furniture selected by Ms. Knight, coal and personal travel linked to the address. That proves nothing. Sabrina reached into her portfolio and removed a keycard envelope. He gave me this. The envelope bore the logo of 410 East Harbor. Temporary access for measurements. Ethan said. You wrote our first home on it. She opened the envelope and showed the handwritten words. Torres photographed it. Ethan looked at her with naked hatred. You are destroying yourself. You already planned to blame me. Sabrina said. What are you talking about? Charles displayed another email. The subject line read, Contingency Narrative. Ethan had written to a private attorney 3 weeks earlier. If internal review occurs, position all unauthorized activity as operational misconduct by S. Cole. Emphasize personal obsession and credential abuse. I was unaware of her actions and became involved only after she threatened exposure. Sabrina read the message twice. Her face went white. You were going to say I stalked you. Ethan said nothing. You were going to say I stole your credentials. That was a contingency. You were going to send me to prison. You created exposure. For you? No. For us? There was never an us. Ethan's silence answered. Sabrina pushed the briefcase away and turned toward Grant. I want a lawyer. That is your right, Lust. And I want to cooperate. Speak to counsel first. I have messages. Voice notes. A second phone. He made me keep everything off the company system. Ethan closed his eyes. Sabrina. He keeps cash in a safe at the penthouse sales office. Be quiet. He paid Howard Bell $20,000. Charles's expression hardened. For what to approve the contact override? Ethan slammed his palm onto the table. She is lying. Sabrina flinched, but continued. Howard met us at a steakhouse in April. Ethan gave him an envelope. I booked the room. You have proof, Grant asked. A photograph. Ethan told me to take it in case Howard became difficult. Where? On my second phone. Stop talking. Ethan said again. But the authority was gone from his voice. Grant motioned toward Torres. He left the room to arrange separate counsel and preservation. Charles collected the documents from the briefcase. Maria marked each packet. Evelyn sat beside me. Close enough that our sleeves touched. I realized my hands were trembling beneath the table. Not from fear. From the delayed impact of hearing Ethan say he would have kept me comfortable after stealing my life. The sentence was worse than any confession of desire. It reduced 12 years to a budget line. Charles reached the final tab. There is one more document. He placed it in front of Ethan. It was titled, Confirmation of Prior Instructions. The document required both Ethan and me to acknowledge that all previous transfers had been jointly directed. It included a representation that no signature had been applied without authorization. Below that was a broad indemnification protecting Whitmore Strategic Holdings and its managers from claims. "This is the page you needed, Mrs. Whitmore to sign today," Charles asked. Ethan read it. It was part of the standard packet. Who drafted it? Outside counsel. Which counsel I would need to check. Your metadata identifies you as the author. I used a template. Why include retroactive confirmation to eliminate administrative uncertainty? Uncertainty created by forged documents, allegedly forged. Maria placed the forensic report beside him. Digitally proven. Ethan looked toward me again. Nora, do you understand what happens if you pursue this? Yes. Our marriage becomes public. Your colleagues will know. Your board will question your judgment. You are a risk officer who did not know her own husband was moving money. He had found the last weapon available to him. Shame. I have already disclosed the conflict to my employer. I said. When 6 weeks ago, his expression shifted. You told them I followed policy. You humiliated me. They do not employ you. People talk. Let them. Your reputation matters to you. Not more than the truth. You will always be the woman whose husband chose someone else. I looked across the table at Sabrina. She looked down. No. I said. I will be the woman whose husband mistook trust for permission. Grant returned. Counsel is being arranged. At this point, we are ending the voluntary interview. Ethan pushed back his chair. Am I free to leave? Yes. Is she? He nodded towards Sabrina. Yes? Then I am leaving. He reached for his briefcase. Maria placed a hand over it. The contents are subject to preservation. That is my property. Several documents contain Mrs. Barry E. Day, Whitmore's personal financial information, and possible evidence of fraud. You cannot seize it, Grant said. The bank can retain documents presented for a transaction. Your attorney can address the rest. Ethan looked at me one final time. Are you coming home? The question was so absurd that Charles glanced away. No. I said. Where are you going? Somewhere you do not have a key. He walked out alone. Through the glass wall. I watched him cross the private client lobby. He kept his shoulders straight until the elevator doors closed. Sabrina remained seated. Her hands were wrapped around the platinum bracelet. I did not know everything. She said to me, You knew he was married. He said you were separated. You called to ask whether I had signed divorce papers. He said the marriage was over emotionally. You helped move money. He said it was his. You laughed that I reviewed risk for strangers but not my own home. She closed her eyes. I am sorry. You are sorry because the apartment disappeared. That is not fair. Neither was using my mother's money to furnish it. Tears rose in her eyes. I loved him. So did I. That was the only mercy I offered. Torres returned with instructions for Sabrina to remain available and surrender the second phone through counsel. She removed the platinum bracelet and placed it on the table. I do not want this. It was purchased with traceable funds. Priya said through the monitor. It will be inventoried. Sabrina looked toward the screen. Startled to realize another person had been present. How many people knew enough? I said. She stood, gathered her empty portfolio, and left with a bank security officer. The door closed. For several seconds, I sat without speaking. The investigators began discussing next steps. Charles apologized for the bank's control failures. Maria outlined preservation notices. Evelyn asked whether I wanted her to contact a security company for the house. Their voices became distant. I looked at the bracelet on my wrist. Ethan had fastened it there 6 hours earlier and called it a new beginning. I unclasped it and set it beside Sabrina's 20. Matching evidence. Priya's face filled the screen. Nora. I am here. The Cayman transfer is blocked. Good. The domestic accounts are frozen. Good. The trustee has revoked Ethan's administrative authority. Good. You can stop working for 1 minute. I looked at the city through the windows. The river moved between the buildings. Indifferent and steady. I do not know how. Evelyn stood and closed the folders, then began with breathing. I inhaled. My chest hurt. I exhaled. The first tear reached my cheek before I understood I was crying. No one congratulated me. No one said I had won. Charles and Maria left quietly. The investigators moved to the next room. Priya turned off her camera. Evelyn sat beside me and held my hand. I cried for the husband who had never existed exactly as I remembered him. I cried for my mother, whose money had been treated like a prize. I cried because part of me still wanted Ethan to walk back into the room, place the documents in the trash, and explain that the last 6 months were a terrible misunderstanding. Evidence does not erase attachment. It only removes the places where denial can hide. After 20 minutes, I washed my face in the private restroom and changed the bracelet-shaped indentation on my wrist into a red line by rubbing it too hard. Evelyn handed me a key. What is this? A furnished apartment owned by my firm. Secure building. Your clothes and essentials are being delivered. You planned this? Yes. How did you know I would not go home? Because you asked us to change the alarm codes at noon. I had forgotten. What about Ethan? He has lawful access to the house until a court orders otherwise. But the trust documents and your devices are gone. Security will monitor the exterior. You do not need to be there. Patricia and Marianne are coming for dinner. They can enjoy the pancakes. Despite everything, I laughed. It came out broken. But it was laughter. At 4:30, my own phone began receiving messages. Ethan, call me. Ethan, we can fix this before attorneys turn it into something it is not. Ethan, Sabrina manipulated both of us. Ethan, I never intended to hurt you. Ethan, think about 12 years. Ethan, your mother would not want this. The final message erased any remaining softness. He had invoked my mother after trying to steal what she built. I blocked his number only after our legal preservation system captured the messages. Then Patricia called. I let it ring. Marianne called twice. A family friend texted to say Ethan was devastated and confused. By 5, the narrative had begun. I was vindictive. I had misunderstood routine financial planning. I had ambushed my husband at his workplace. I had humiliated him in front of federal agents over an emotional affair that had already ended. Ethan did not mention the forged signature. He did not mention the offshore account. He did not mention Sabrina's phone call. Lies move quickly when they do not have to carry evidence. At 6, Evelyn and I arrived at the apartment. It overlooked a quiet residential street rather than the river. The furniture was plain. The refrigerator contained groceries someone from her office had purchased. My suitcase stood beside the bedroom door. On the kitchen counter was a yellow envelope addressed in my own handwriting. The letter to Ethan. My assistant had packed it with the rest of my documents. I held it for a long time, then placed it in a drawer. He was not entitled to the memories I had written while he was preparing to erase me. At 7:15, the building concierge called, Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Ethan Whitmore is in the lobby. Do not send him up. He says he lives here. He does not. He appears upset. Call security if he refuses to leave. 5 minutes later, Ethan sent an email because his number was blocked. Subject, please. Nora. I am downstairs. I know you are angry. But you owe me a conversation without strangers listening. Sabrina lied to protect herself. The account structure was aggressive, but it was meant to secure our future. I prepared divorce documents because I did not know whether you still loved me. I never intended to file them unless you forced me. Please come down. We can go home together. I read the message twice. The logic was breathtaking. He had prepared to divorce me because he feared I did not love him. He forged my signature to secure our future. He bought an apartment for another woman because I had forced him to doubt the marriage. Every action became my fault if he described it long enough. I forwarded the email to Evelyn and did not answer. At 7:40, the concierge called again. Ethan had left. At 8, Patricia arrived. She was 70. Elegant. And accustomed to being welcomed wherever she appeared. Security called upstairs. She says she is your mother. She is my husband's mother. Should we deny entry? Yes. Patricia began calling from an unknown number. I answered once. Nora. This has gone far enough. Hello? Patricia. Ethan told us what you did. Did he tell you what he did? He made financial decisions for the family. He forged my signature. That is an ugly accusation. It is a forensic conclusion. You always hide behind technical language. The document was digitally altered. Married people sign for each other all the time. Not on trust transfers. You are destroying his career over paperwork. He attempted to transfer $1.4 million. Money has always mattered more to you than people. I thought of the false affidavit bearing her signature. Did people matter when you wrote that I nearly burned down my kitchen? Silence. I do not know what you are talking about. Your affidavit dated April 3rd. Ethan said it was for an insurance matter. It states that I left a burner on, became violent when confronted, and appeared confused. You have been under stress. Were you in my house on the date you described? That is not the point. Were you? Ethan needed support. So you lied. I trusted my son. That is what he assumed I would do. Patricia's voice sharpened. You will regret treating this family like criminals. Some of you signed criminal documents. I am coming upstairs. No. You cannot keep me from my daughter-in-law. Watch me. I ended the call and instructed security to remove her if necessary. She stayed in the lobby for 12 minutes, then left. The next morning, her attorney contacted Evelyn. Patricia wanted to withdraw the affidavit and claimed she had not read it carefully. Marianne made the same claim before noon. The family solidarity lasted less than 24 hours. Once personal liability became visible, Ethan's professional collapse began on Monday. His firm placed him on administrative leave and disabled his access. Howard Bell was suspended. Sabrina resigned through counsel and surrendered 2 phones, a laptop, and a handwritten notebook. The notebook contained transaction dates, account numbers, gift lists, travel plans, and instructions from Ethan. She had documented everything because she did not fully trust him. In that one instinct, she had been correct. Priya called me Monday evening. There is more. How much more company clients? I closed my eyes. Explain. Ethan used the same shell structure to route referral payments that should have been disclosed. At least 4 clients invested in private deals where he had an undisclosed interest. Did he steal from them? Possibly. We are still tracing. Your trust money may have been used to cover losses in one of the deals. That was the hidden engine. Ethan's affair had not created the fraud. The fraud had created the need for my money. 18 months earlier, he invested secretly in a boutique hotel development through a company associated with one of his clients. The project failed. Construction costs rose. Permits stalled. And lenders demanded additional capital. Ethan had personally guaranteed part of the financing. If he defaulted, he would lose his job, his reputation, and much of our shared wealth. Instead of telling me, he began moving funds from the family reserve. Sabrina helped because he promised the hotel would make them rich. When the losses continued, they planned to transfer a larger amount, close on the penthouse to create the appearance of a legitimate real estate asset. then move remaining funds offshore. The divorce would isolate me from the accounts before I understood the scale. Ethan was not leaving me because he fell in love. He was leaving because I had become the only person capable of detecting the financial hole beneath him. Sabrina was not the destination. She was the accomplice he believed he could discard. Priya found a voice memo Ethan had sent her after an argument. Once Nora signs, we let Sabrina think the Cayman structure is permanent. If the hotel recovers, everyone gets paid. If it fails, the entities are in Sabrina's name, and we distance ourselves. Nora receives a settlement and moves on. We listened to the memo in Evelyn's office. Everyone gets paid. I repeated. Except you. Priya said. I receive a settlement. From your own money? Generous. Evelyn did not smile. This memo materially strengthens intent. Will he be arrested? I cannot predict timing. Will he go to prison? I cannot promise an outcome. I know. What do you want? Nora. The question irritated me. I want the money recovered. Beyond that, I want the false documents withdrawn. Beyond that, I want my name cleared. Beyond that, I looked at the wall behind her. I want him to understand what he did. Evelyn's expression softened. The legal system may punish him. It cannot guarantee understanding. She was right. Consequences and remorse are not the same thing. Ethan's attorneys requested a private settlement conference. They proposed that he resign, return identified assets, disclaim interest in the trust, and agree to an uncontested divorce if I declined to cooperate with criminal investigators. Evelyn did not bother presenting the proposal as realistic. They are asking you to trade public accountability for financial recovery. Can they guarantee recovery? No. Then there is nothing to discuss. Ethan sent another email. Nora. Criminal charges will destroy both of us. Our finances are intertwined. The house will be tied up. Legal fees will consume years. I made mistakes because I was desperate. The hotel deal was supposed to protect our retirement. Sabrina pushed the personal relationship. I was ashamed and did not know how to tell you. Please remember who I was before this. I wrote a response and deleted it. Then I wrote another. Finally, I sent one sentence through counsel. The man you were before this would have told me the truth. Discovery and the divorce began 3 weeks later. Ethan claimed the affair started only after our marriage had emotionally ended. His messages showed otherwise. He claimed I had voluntarily delegated authority. The forged documents showed otherwise. He claimed the offshore account was a tax planning option. The recorded call showed otherwise. He claimed Sabrina acted independently. His emails, fingerprint authentication, voice notes, and contingency plan showed otherwise. Every defense required us to ignore a different category of evidence. The more he spoke, the smaller the space around him became. In July, a grand jury investigation became public through a filing connected to Howard Bell. News outlets reported that a private wealth advisor, an operations employee, and a bank supervisor were under investigation for unauthorized transfers and false client verification. My name was not released. But colleagues understood. Ethan had predicted they would question my judgment. Some did. One board member asked why I had not identified the risk earlier. I answered honestly. Because trust is not a control environment. I did not treat my spouse like a counterparty until evidence required it. The board commissioned an independent review of my conduct. I provided every disclosure, timeline, and preservation notice. 2 weeks later, they concluded I had followed policy from the moment a reportable conflict became apparent. Rather than remove me, the bank asked me to lead a new internal program on financial abuse and trusted person fraud. Ethan had tried to make my private humiliation destroy my career. Instead, the evidence expanded the work I was uniquely prepared to do. The house became the next battlefield. Ethan remained there after I moved out. The mortgage was joint, but the down payment had come largely from my premarital savings. He hosted Patricia and Marianne, who helped him pack documents, until a court preservation order prohibited removal. He changed the alarm code. He told neighbors I had abandoned him. Then he discovered that the security system administrator was me. I did not lock him out because the court had not granted exclusive possession. I did, however, preserve every door event, every visitor entry, and every attempt to access the basement safe. On August 9th, Ethan entered the safe at 2:13 in the morning and removed a metal cash box. Exterior cameras recorded him placing it in Patricia's car. Agents executed search warrants 2 days later. The cash box contained $94,000, 3 foreign passports in different names, and account access tokens for the Cayman service. Patricia claimed she thought the box held family photographs. Her attorney advised her to stop speaking publicly. Marianne withdrew entirely. She sent me a handwritten apology saying Ethan had told her the affidavit was part of a temporary guardianship plan designed to protect me. I believed she had been manipulated. I also believed she had chosen not to ask questions because the lie benefited her brother. I did not respond. By September, Sabrina had entered a cooperation agreement. Through her records, investigators recovered the emerald earrings, the second bracelet, $26,000 in designer goods, and deposits tied to the penthouse. She admitted changing my contact information, routing verification calls, and preparing altered documents. She insisted Ethan directed each action. Howard Bell admitted approving the override after Ethan told him the transfer was urgent and offering him a consulting fee. The so-called consulting fee was the $20,000 Sabrina described. The bank terminated him and referred the matter to regulators. Ethan remained the only person insisting that everything was a misunderstanding. His attorneys attacked Sabrina's credibility. They called her a resentful mistress. They argued that I had exploited marital access to build a criminal case. They suggested I had approved aggressive investments and changed my story after discovering the affair. Then investigators recovered the original transition plan from an encrypted backup Ethan believed he had deleted. The document contained his own tracked revisions. Beside the section describing my supposed emotional collapse, he had written need enough public incidents to support temporary control. Beside the signature plan, real signature at bank cures prior defects. Beside Sabrina's future role, keep vague until funds secure. Beside the contingency narrative, blaming her only if necessary, the document did not merely prove intent. It revealed how he categorized human beings. I was an obstacle. Sabrina was exposure. Patricia and Marianne were witnesses. Howard was access. Clients were capital. Love appeared nowhere. The divorce mediation occurred in October. Ethan entered through a separate door and sat across from me for the first time since the bank meeting. He had lost weight. His tailored suit hung loosely at the shoulders, without the watch, cufflinks, and confident entourage. He looked older than 41. Our attorneys occupied both sides of the room. A retired judge served as mediator. Before discussions began, Ethan asked to speak to me privately. Evelyn refused. Anything he needs to say can be said here. Ethan looked at me. Nora, please. The mediator asked whether I consented. He can speak. I said, not privately. Ethan folded his hands. I am sorry. No one responded. I know that is not enough. Correct. I was under pressure. I did not know how to explain. You explained it to Sabrina. I told her what she wanted to hear, and told me what I wanted to hear. I lost perspective. You wrote a 23-page plan. His eyes lowered. I was trying to save the hotel investment. By stealing my inheritance, I intended to replace the funds. With what future profits? From a project already failing. There was still a chance. Not enough of one to risk your own name. His jaw tightened. The old anger flickered. You always make everything sound simple after the fact. Forgery was simple before the fact. I knew you would say no. That is why consent matters. We were married. Marriage is not permanent financial authorization. I thought what was yours was ours. Then why was the penthouse only for you and Sabrina? He had no answer. After a moment, he said, I never loved her the way I loved you. The sentence did not move me. You protected yourself from her and stole from me. That is not a useful comparison. Can you forgive me? No. His face changed more at that answer than it had when federal agents appeared. Perhaps some part of him believed forgiveness remained one of the assets marriage guaranteed. The mediation lasted 9 hours. Ethan relinquished any claim to the family reserve. Assigned his interest in the house, subject to debt allocation. Surrendered retirement assets equal to documented marital losses, and accepted responsibility for legal costs arising from the forged filings. In exchange, we avoided litigating several secondary property disputes. Nothing in the agreement affected the criminal investigation. When it ended, the mediator asked whether either party had questions. Ethan looked at the gold bracelet listed in the evidence schedule. What happened to the things I gave her? He asked. Which her Evelyn replied. He did not answer. The 2 bracelets were eventually sold through an authorized recovery process. The proceeds returned to the trust. My mother's earrings came back in a padded evidence envelope. I did not wear them immediately. For months, they remained in my safe because every time I looked at them, I saw Sabrina on the rooftop with Ethan's hand at her back. Then, on my mother's birthday, I put them on and went to work. Objects do not belong forever to the worst thing done with them. The months between the divorce mediation and the criminal trial were the quietest and most dangerous part of the story because public attention faded while private pressure increased. Ethan's attorneys sent letters challenging every preservation step. They demanded access to the original phone, accused Priya of altering metadata, and argued that the bank meeting had been designed to provoke admissions rather than process a legitimate transaction. Each allegation required a response. An expiat. And another invoice. Fraud does not stop costing the victim when the money is frozen. It continues through time. Concentration. Sleep. And the repeated obligation to prove what the offender already knows is true. One evening, I returned from work and found a white envelope pushed beneath my apartment door. There was no stamp. Inside was a photograph from our wedding and a note in Ethan's handwriting. You know this was real. Do not let strangers rewrite us. I called building security. Camera footage showed Patricia entering behind another resident and leaving the envelope. Evelyn sent a formal no-contact notice. Patricia responded that a mother had the right to defend her son. The building revoked her access permanently. I kept the photograph, but discarded the note after it was preserved. The image showed Ethan's hand around mine during our first dance. I did know that moment had been real to me. That was enough. Reality did not require his continued agreement. My employer's review created another kind of pressure. Investigators interviewed my team, examined whether I had used bank systems for personal purposes, and reviewed every internal disclosure. I understood the necessity, but understanding did not make it painless. For 2 weeks, I entered meetings knowing people had read details of my marriage that I had not yet told some friends. A junior analyst named Daniel Ruiz waited after one session and said, "You taught us that controls fail when people fear embarrassment. Thank you for not hiding this." His words stayed with me. Shame survives through secrecy. Ethan had counted on my professional pride to keep me quiet. The independent review concluded that I had acted appropriately. But it also identified a broader vulnerability. Senior employees were expected to disclose conflicts involving outside business interests. Yet there was no confidential process for reporting suspected financial abuse by a spouse. I helped design one, The first version was only a secure email box and a protocol for separating the employee from account decisions. Within 6 months, it became a formal program. During that period, the failed hotel development entered bankruptcy. Court records showed that Ethan's personal guarantee was larger than Priya first estimated. He had concealed nearly $2 million in contingent exposure. Some of the money taken from my trust had covered interest payments designed to delay default long enough for the divorce plan to succeed. When the project collapsed, several investors lost significant savings. 2 were retired clients who had trusted Ethan because he described the deal as conservative. I met one of them, a widower named Gerald, in Evelyn's office. He did not blame me, but I could see the question in his face. How could someone so close to Ethan not know I am sorry? I said, "You did not sell me the investment." He replied, "He used your name." Ethan had told clients that my risk expertise supported the project. He referenced my position without my permission and claimed our family reserve had invested heavily. In reality, the reserve money was used after the project was failing, not because I believed in it. Gerald handed Priya a presentation deck. One slide read, "Independently stress-tested by a senior banking risk executive." My name was not printed, but Ethan had identified me verbally in meetings. The discovery in Gutain, the reputational harm, and the prosecution's theory of motive. He had not merely stolen from me to cover a bad investment. He had used my credibility to attract money, then used my money to conceal the losses. At a pretrial hearing, I saw him across the courtroom. He wore a plain gray suit and no wedding ring. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Ethan looked at me once and mouthed, "I am sorry." I did not respond. Later, his attorney approached Evelyn with another offer. Ethan would plead to a narrow false statement charge if prosecutors dismissed the conspiracy counts and if I issued a statement describing the marriage as financially collaborative. "He wants you to rehabilitate his intent," Evelyn said. "He wants me to say we made decisions together." Yes. The entire case exists because we did not. We declined. That night, I finally opened the letter I had written before the bank meeting. I read about Nebraska, the broken radiator, my mother's surgery, and the version of Ethan who once knew how I took my coffee. Then I added one sentence at the bottom: "These memories belong to me, even if you became someone who could not honor them." I placed the letter in a sealed box with our wedding photograph and stored it in my new apartment. Moving forward did not require me to burn every proof that I had loved him. It required me to stop using love as evidence that he was still safe. The criminal case moved more slowly than public imagination prefers to the end of Dinesh. There was no dramatic arrest at midnight. No immediate trial. No judge delivering justice within a week. There were subpoenas, motions, interviews, expert reports, and months of negotiation. Ethan was eventually charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, bankfraud, aggravated identity-related offenses, and making false statements connected to financial transactions. Howard faced narrower charges. Sabrina pleaded guilty to conspiracy and unauthorized access, receiving consideration for cooperation. Ethan pleaded not guilty. He said he looked forward to clearing his name. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked whether I had a comment. I gave none. He had used public narrative as a weapon. I would not turn the case into entertainment before facts were tested. At trial, prosecutors played the phone call. Hearing Sabrina's voice in the courtroom transported me back to the train. Did she sign the divorce papers yet? Jurors listened as she described the secret account and the forged emails. They saw the transaction chart, the altered profile, the signature image, the transition plan, the apartment purchases, and the contingency email blaming Sabrina. Howard testified about the envelope. Sabrina testified for 2 days. Under cross-examination, Ethan's lawyer emphasized her lies and personal motive. She admitted both. Then the prosecutor asked a final question. Did your dishonesty create the defendant's fingerprint on the authorization device? No. She said. Did it write his transition plan? No. Did it make him send you Mrs. Leaven-8 Whitmore's signature file? No. Ethan chose to testify. Evelyn had warned me he might. He told the jury that our marriage was controlling and emotionally barren. He said I reviewed every purchase and undermined his professional identity. He described the shell companies as desperate attempts to preserve an investment he believed would eventually benefit us both. He admitted the affair but denied planning to steal from me. He claimed the divorce documents were precautionary. He claimed the mental health allegations reflected genuine concern. Then the prosecutor showed him the line in his plan: need enough public incidents to support temporary control. What did you mean by need enough? She asked. I was recording incidents that had not occurred. Concerns. You wrote public incidents. Why did they need to be public? For witnesses. Witnesses to future behavior. Ethan paused. To behavior I expected. Because you planned to provoke it? No. You invited your mother and sister to dinner after the bank meeting. It was a family dinner. You expected Mrs. Line Whitmore to sign divorce papers hidden within financial documents that afternoon. I dispute that characterization. Then why did Ms. Lingasawar Cole ask whether the papers had been signed? She misunderstood. Why did you tell her to keep the divorce provisions behind the asset pages? Efficiency. A murmur moved through the courtroom. The prosecutor waited. Efficiency in hiding them? No. Efficiency in obtaining a signature before your wife understood the document? No. What kind of efficiency? He could not answer without choosing a crime. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They found him guilty on most counts. At sentencing, Ethan stood before the judge and described losing his career, his marriage, his home, and his reputation. He said he had already suffered. The judge replied that consequences following exposure were not the same as accountability. Ethan received a substantial federal sentence. Restitution obligation, and supervised release. It was less than some observers wanted and more than he believed possible. I did not feel triumphant when the marshals led him away. I felt quiet. The legal system had named what happened. That mattered. It did not return 12 years. Outside the courthouse, Patricia approached me. She looked smaller than I remembered. Are you happy now? She asked. Reporters stood 20 feet away. I could have answered cruelly. Instead, I said, no. I am safe now. Then I walked past her. The penthouse at 410 East Harbor never closed. The title company returned part of the deposit, and the remaining funds became part of restitution. The furniture Sabrina selected was auctioned. Meridian Residential Partners was dissolved. The Cayman account was restrained before the $800,000 transfer completed, and most domestic funds were recovered. Not everything came back. Fraud consumes money through fees, losses, taxes, and legal expense. But the trust survived. More importantly, its control structure changed. No spouse, advisor, or family member would ever again have administrative authority without independent verification directly from me. I sold the brownstone after the divorce. Friends asked whether leaving felt like letting Ethan take another part of my life. It did not. The house had become a stage where both of us performed versions of marriage. I wanted walls that had never heard him tell me I was imagining things. I bought a smaller apartment near the lake with large windows and no room designated as his office. On the first night, I ate noodles from a white carton at the kitchen counter. Rain tapped against the glass. Just as it had the night he asked whether I trusted him with everything, I expected the memory to break me. Instead, it passed through and left the room. 1 year after the phone call, Sterling Private Bank launched a trusted person fraud initiative for clients at risk of financial abuse by spouses, caregivers, business partners, or family members. I led the program. We trained employees to recognize profile changes, unusual contact substitutions, urgency narratives, secrecy requests, and transactions that technically fit authority limits while violating the customer's known intent. We added mandatory out-of-band verification for trust transfers. We built alerts around repeated access by employees connected personally to beneficiaries. We created a confidential pathway for clients who feared retaliation at home. The first woman who used it was 67. Her second husband had been moving money into accounts controlled by his adult son. She sat across from me and apologized repeatedly for not noticing sooner. "I should have known," she said. I recognized the shame because Ethan had tried to place it on me. Trust is not stupidity. I told her, "The person who abused it is responsible for the abuse." She began to cry. So did I. After she left. Not because the work reopened the wound, but because it gave the wound somewhere useful to go. Sabrina wrote me a letter from a residential reentry program. She did not ask forgiveness. She described the lies Ethan told, the choices she made, and the moment she realized he had prepared to sacrifice her. She said she had spent months blaming him for everything before understanding that being deceived did not erase the harm she knowingly helped cause. She enclosed a photograph of my mother's earrings from the New York hotel and apologized for wearing them. I read the letter once. Then I placed it with the case records. I did not respond. But I did not destroy it. Accountability does not require permanent hatred. It only requires that truth remain intact. Marianne eventually asked to meet. Unlike Patricia, she did not demand reconciliation. She brought the false affidavit and placed it on the cafe table between us. I signed this without reading all of it. She said, "That is not an excuse." No. Why? Because Ethan said you were going to take everything and ruin him. He said he needed proof that the family had concerns. Did you have concerns? I thought you were distant. So you described a fire that never happened. She looked down. I wanted him to stop calling. You could have said no. I know. You could have called me. I know. You chose convenience. Yes. Her honesty surprised me. We did not become sisters. We met twice more. Then allowed the relationship to settle into distance. Patricia never apologized. She continued to describe Ethan as a victim of ambition, stress, and a vindictive wife. Some people need a false story because the truth would require them to examine the person they raised and the choices they enabled. I stopped trying to correct her. Facts had already done the work where it mattered. On the anniversary of the bank meeting, I returned to conference room 7. Charles had invited me to speak to a group of private banking executives about control design. The walnut table looked exactly the same. For a moment, I saw Ethan sitting beside me, his hand covering mine as he told the room I understood the plan. Then the image disappeared. I began my presentation with a question. What is the most dangerous assumption in a trusted relationship? People offered answers. Familiarity, urgency, authority, lack of oversight. I clicked to the next slide. It contained one sentence. Trust removes the instinct to verify. The answer? I said, is that love and control are the same thing. They are not. Love does not require blindness. Marriage does not erase ownership. Loyalty does not turn forged consent into real consent. And silence does not mean the person you are deceiving has failed to notice. Sometimes silence means she is listening to every word. Sometimes she is preserving the records. Sometimes she is allowing you to continue because the final piece of evidence has not arrived yet. Ethan believed he controlled the timeline. He chose when to move the money, when to prepare the divorce, when to introduce Sabrina, and when to place the signature pages in front of me. But the moment I answered his phone, Control changed hands. I did not win because I was colder than he was. I survived because I stopped arguing with the story he told and began examining the evidence underneath it. My husband thought one signature would leave me without my marriage, my inheritance, or my name. Instead, the signature he forged became the line. Investigators followed through every account, every company, and every lie. He thought his mistress's call was part of the plan. It became the recording that exposed it. He thought the secret account would protect his future. It preserved the path of the money. He thought my trust made me weak. Trust was never my weakness. His belief that he could abuse it without consequence was his Bellenoleringatter. If you are listening to this while questioning inconsistencies in your own relationship, do not let anyone shame you for asking where the money went, why the password changed, or why a document carries your name when you do not remember signing it. You do not need to accuse before you understand. You do not need to scream before you prepare. Preserve what you can. Speak to qualified professionals. Protect your access. Learn what you own. And remember that the person demanding blind trust may be the person most afraid of verification. I took my husband's phone by mistake. The mistake was ordinary. What it revealed was not. 12 years of marriage ended because a woman on the other end of the line believed she was speaking to the man who controlled everything. She kept talking because she thought I was silent, ignorant, and already defeated. She was wrong about all three. Before your signature leaves your hand, pause long enough to answer 3 questions. What authority am I giving away? What will become difficult to reverse? And who benefits if I sign today instead of after an independent review? A legitimate professional should be able to explain every page, provide a complete copy, and allow you to verify the request through official contact information. Urgency and secrecy do not automatically prove fraud, but they are valid reasons to stop. Protecting yourself means using lawful channels, not entering accounts without permission, altering files, or creating evidence that did not exist. Scriptwriter Nguyen Van Chien.